You're listening to Served Up, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful conversations. I'm your host, Bridget Albert, also known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with decades of experience. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry. Hey, y'all, it's Bridget here. My guest host, Jessica Bardo-Reggio, who is a celebrated wine expert, and I are joined by a true force in the world of wine, Andrea Englisis, president of Athenee Importers. As the head of one of the leading importers of premium Greek and Mediterranean wines, Andrea is not only carrying on a family legacy, but also creating new pathways into the industry. Under her leadership, she has become a gateway for American consumers and professionals to experience the depth, history, and culture and the vibrancy of Greek winemaking. With a sharp eye for quality and a deep respect for tradition, she brings a modern strategic voice to an ancient craft. So sit back, relax, grab yourself your favorite Greek wine, and enjoy the show. Andrea, welcome to Served Up. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. This is my first podcast ever, so I'm very excited.
Well, we'll make this extra specially fun for you, won't we, Jessica?
Welcome, Andrea. So happy you're here.
Jessica.
So excited for you, for us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Andrea, can you tell our listeners about yourself? Where do you come from? Where did you grow up? Did you always, love the beverage world, or were you thinking of something else early on?
So I am one of the owners of Athenee Importers, which is my family business that my parents started in 1974, as a matter of fact. My mother came over from Greece when she was a kid, back when she was 15, 16 years old. And my dad was born here in the U.S., in New York specifically. To Greek parents. So I am second generation, or one and a half, I guess you could say, either one. Born in New York, raised here as well. And so my parents started the business back in 74. And interestingly enough, they were the first importers and partners with William Deutsch for George Dubuff. Old school stuff, long time ago. But then they decided to part ways in the 80s. And my parents decided to start to focus on the emerging wine industry in Greece and Cyprus, because Greece, even though it's one of the oldest winemaking countries in the world, it has gone through many iterations between wars, military occupations, everything, you name it, that the modern era of the industry in Greece for wine, even in Cyprus, started pretty much in the late 70s, early 80s. So they decided after they parted ways to start to focus on what was starting to happen in Greece. So that's how my parents started the company. So I guess you could say that I've been involved since birth, pretty much. I was always with them, obviously traveling. I'm an only child, so I got to go everywhere where they were. And I was let to run rampant in a vineyard and a winery, much to many people's chagrins, but is what it is. So it's not that I actually, said, okay, I have to take this over or anything like that. But it really came down to, I've been born and bred New Yorker, was born in Manhattan back in the day. We are on Long Island. We actually own our building here. So that's been a great help, especially when we're going through all sorts of economic and, interesting turmoil that happens in the world. So that's been a great help that my parents were really smart back in the day and bought our warehouse. And luckily it's a killer commute. It's 10 minutes from my house. So it doesn't suck. We're not far on Long Island. We're 15 minutes from JFK. So the planes even fly over my head. So for me, it's great to just, take the train and get to the airport. But so that's part of that. But then basically I went to college at GW and graduated in 97. So yes, I'm dating myself now. And then started to learn the ropes, I would say, from the beginning. I was basically left in the office to just try to learn everything slowly. And that was a learning curve, was like this, just like a super steep one. And then in 1999, we were all in Greece just, on vacation. And my father passed away. He was, if you have to go, you need to go on a beach in the middle of nowhere. And it is what it is. It sucked, not going to lie, because I was a 25-year-old idiot at that point and trying to be like, okay, my mother needed time to check out, and basically, get her head back around because, that was the love of her life. And so she kind of took a little bit of time off just to kind of get her head back in the game. That was at a time too when a lot of people didn't think that women could run a business, especially Greeks. And so, we had some ups and downs. Some people decided to leave and said women can't run a business. And I gave a lot of them a big middle finger and said, yeah, bust out, no problem, all good. And so that was like our first, if you want to say, iteration of like what happened after, like in the late 90s. So that was a huge learning curve, even for me then. I mean, I was only 2 years in before that happened. And then I had to start to take on more of a role of working with our producers, paying all the bills and, doing a lot more of that stuff. So that was in 99. And obviously what are we in 2025? So still here, still fighting the good fight. As I was saying too, things have just, as things change, like the world of wine within Greece and Cyprus, because we do both countries. And I never want to just say Greece because Cypriots are different. It's been an interesting ride because it's gone everywhere. I've seen the development from the ground up from, let's say, that early 90s situation where when I started, all we could sell was Greek Chardonnay, Cabernet, and Merlot. And that was it, to today where we've got over 200 SKUs and less than 10% are Chardonnay, Cabernet, and Merlot. And nobody wants those. So we've got producers from both Greece and Cyprus. There's about 17 wineries in the portfolio, in addition to some beer and some spirits that we do too. But the way that we've evolved with the evolution of the industry in both countries. And I think it's been really interesting, especially for me, because when I started, nobody wanted to talk to me. I mean, I was a 25-year-old idiot. I didn't know anything. They're like, yeah, I'll wait for you to talk to your mom. It's like, whatever. Okay, fine. But then, as things came along, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I can't talk to her. I got to deal with you. So of course, as we all, sometimes women in this industry, they like to say, oh, she's a pain in the ass. She's a bitch or whatever. She's tough. It's like, no, we're just doing business the right way. And if you don't like it, you don't have to be here. You're more than welcome to leave. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. I've done that to a few people, and much to my mother's chagrin on some cases, but on others, I'm just like, I can't deal with this bullshit. So whatever. So we've, the portfolio has evolved over the decades. And I think now I really like our group of producers because it's a generational shift. So now everybody that I am working with, because I work pretty much, everybody I talk to is an owner. There's a very few export managers because it's like, I don't need to deal with that. If I have to make a deal with somebody, I'm doing it with an owner because I'm an owner. I'm not going to delegate something like that to any of my employees. So everybody we work with now is pretty much anywhere from the age of mid 30s up to like their mid to late 50s. And that's the generation that has learned from their predecessors. They've learned both the mistakes and the successes, and they've built on it. And I feel that where we're at now encapsulates what Greece and Cyprus is. All of the years from the blood, sweat, and tears of the 80s, 90s, early 2000s to the 2020s is finally getting a groove, meaning like we have really well-made wines. I mean, the gone are the days of the $5.99 crappy shit that was yellow on a shelf. I mean, look, it still exists, but it doesn't exist in my book. And if somebody's looking for that, it's like, well, you can go elsewhere. I don't do that. That's not what is relevant in my world anymore. And, it was only relevant probably back in like the 90s. Now, it's definitely changed a lot. And I feel that people are finally realizing that the countries, because again, it's Greece and Cyprus, have such a wealth and a breadth of styles, varietals, and expressions and terroirs that really deserve time and attention. Everybody just thinks like, oh, okay, I just need Santorini Assyrtiko. No. If I tell you that does not pay my bills and hasn't paid my bills in probably 15 years, it doesn't, just doesn't. It's like, it's a great thing to have, but That's not what we do. Like, we do everything. We represent all of the regions for the reasons that we need to have them. So that's why we have so many different producers, big and small, but big for Greece is not big for Spain and Portugal. Our numbers are very different. So when people start to delve into the regions and the categories of what we do, it's like, you can go down the rabbit hole. I mean, there's over 200 indigenous varietals that don't exist anywhere else in the world. And then when people start to taste them, they're like, well, what is this? How do I sell it? I'm like, blank slate. Start from scratch, taste it. If there's something that's similar that you're comfortable comparing it to, I'm okay with it. But don't pigeonhole it, because the days of, I can only sell it to a Greek restaurant, those days are over. Those days have been over for years. We don't sell. If I waited for an ethnic customer to be my primary customer, we would have been out of business 15 years ago. I mean, as you can see, even though I speak fluent Greek, I go to the motherland all the time. It's not our bread and butter anymore. And that wouldn't be if we wanted to grow and actually do justice to our suppliers.
Andrea, wow. Wow. Just all of that, your story, your history, your parents, your family. I love the second generation female owned, of course. But before we get into more kind of the wine talk, I wanted to ask you, especially those early days, what did you learn about yourself and how you had to stick up for yourself, the company, your producers? What did you learn about yourself, especially versus now? What did you take with you?
Well, first was getting people to respect a young female. Again, I was still also super green, in my 20s. Maybe I flew off the handle a little bit more than I would now. I get pretty pissed at people and drop a lot more F-bombs than I do now. I still do, of course, but you're not going to take the New York out of the New Yorker. I think in the beginning, this will be a loaded question and people might come back to me. I think that also in the 90s, when I started, late 90s, early 2000s, the Greek industry was emerging, right? So from when my parents started to now, even to when I started, having wines that were vintage dated appellations, that was, I don't want to say groundbreaking, because they started the system in Greece for the appellations back in the late 60s, early 70s, and they based it off the French system. So it was a very, very specific way of doing things. Winemaking techniques were good. They weren't great. They weren't cutting edge. They were, a lot of oak, because a lot of these, the winemakers they studied a lot of them in Burgundy and Bordeaux, most of them. Some came here to the US and went to Davis. Some stayed in Greece. So you had a very, I don't want to say a generic style, but it wasn't exciting. I mean, it was good. Don't get me wrong. But in this country, it was more ethnic back then. And then, of course, so I had to deal with the annoying Greeks that were then in their 50s, 60s, and not dealing with female, whatever. She knows nothing. But then trying to go into the mainstream market then was harder, because nobody wanted Greek Chardonnay, Cabernet, and Merlot. So we had to find the way to kind of take both paths. We needed to have the ethnic market, because then that was the bread and butter, but then start to cultivate relationships with people that understood that Greece was just starting to scratch the little surface of where it was going to be in 15 years, and really start to embrace those relationships and find those people that were enthusiastic, that were willing to support us as the evolution was going to happen. So I would say that the early years were more about just trying to get credible. So even for me, I didn't know my ass from my elbow about wine back then. I mean, I had a degree in international business and that was it. But so then I ended up going to, I did my diploma through WSET. So I went to understand the business of wine. So once, I think it might have been, oh my God, I think it was Union Square Cafe. And I got my butt handed to me because I didn't know something about wine, and I got chewed out. I'm like, okay, well, this is not going to happen ever again. So I started to go through the whole, every level of WSET, ended up getting my diploma. I think it was in 2006 by the time I finished with everything. Don't ask me to pronounce or to figure out any of the Grand Crus in Burgundy ever again, because I don't remember a damn thing on it. But, I needed that. I think that also helped give me a better understanding of the business of wine in order to be able to speak more intelligently to my suppliers and understand what they're doing. I was never going to work the floor. So I did not want to go through the Court of Master Sommelier. That was never my deal. So I went more for the nuts and bolts business to understand the chemistry, to understand all of that side of things so I could understand better how to do my job on this side. I think, again, as the years evolved and the way that we shed some producers, which, it sucked at the time, but I'm glad it happened. It's like a decade generational shift. Some guys, they were hitting their peak and we couldn't do anything else to get them. There was no other level for some to go. So they left. It sucked. But then, other producers stepped up. And so I think that was a great, that was around 16, 17 that happened. And in a way, now I can say that I'm a happy person that they're gone because it was like an albatross around my neck. And now I think we found the right fit of producers that understand how their strength in numbers. This group is more, I don't want to call them collaborative, but they're more understanding that in order to grow the category of Greece and Cyprus in the world globally, they have to present a united front. The older generation was like, F you all. I worked my ass off. You're going to focus on me. I'm the king of the hill. Wasn't going to work in today's day and age. So for us, I think that it's, as I always tell my suppliers, it's like, this is like a long-term, this is a marriage. If we're starting this, you can't think that you're going to have your gains in 2 years. You need to look at the long-term plan, like 10 years down the road. Where do you think you're going to, how to get to where you want to go? It's not going to happen overnight, and you need to be willing to work. Those that are willing to work, do the right thing, listen to us. I mean, for our market, and come here, work, listen to what we're telling them. Those are the ones that succeed. The ones that kind of have kept blinders on and think that they can micromanage from the other side. Those are the ones that it's like, well, either you come here and see what's going on or keep your stuff where it is, that kind of thing. So that's always like the shift we have. And, if somebody's unhappy, I'm like, okay, go. If you need to go find somewhere else to go and you think you're going to be better represented, please do. But there's plenty of other fish in the sea too. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. So it's not that we'll ever put our eggs in a basket again like we did in 17. It was a different beast. Now I think we've really covered the bases with really great producers that make solid products at many different price levels. So that gives us the competitive advantage to be able to be a good partner for our distributors and for our retail partners too.
Let me ask you this, Andrea, because our listeners really love to get to know the people behind the brand as well, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that because we are a worldwide podcast, a lot of folks might not be hip to Greece and the Greek culture and why, wine is important and how is it celebrated? How is it used? Can you talk to that specifically?
Well, in antiquity, wine was used during the big, great symposiums. I don't know what on earth they were drinking back then, but, that's what the original sommelier was. That was a person that was actually sent to taste the wine and dilute it to the proper level before giving it out to the nobility and to those that were at these symposiums. So they were going to get hammered, but in a less dramatic fashion. So wine has always been a key part of the Hellenic culture. But in terms of now, let's go into, antiquity was antiquity. But for now, in Greece too, when you're drinking something, you're not, do you sit there and hang out on a beautiful porch and overlook the sunset and, have a couple of cocktails? Yes. But in Greece and Cyprus, wine has always been something at the table. You could be a 5-year-old kid. Your parents would give you, and they did to me too, a little bit of wine, put some water in it, and you would be to be included. You always had something on the table, and that's how it was meant to be enjoyed. A lot of our grape varietals too tend to be ones that pair really well with food. So they're really high acid. They're not low alcohol, but 12 to 14%. And so you have something that's refreshing in your glass. And so when you're eating something, you want to take a sip of something that is able to enliven your palate and to make everything, make you ready for the next bite of food. So yes, are people going out having drinks and going to wine bars? Yes, that's a huge now new part of the culture today is this huge upswell in wine bars in Greece as well as everywhere else. And, that's what people are doing as well to learn more about the culture. But that's always been something. It's a staple product at the table, be it when you're 5 years old to when you're 105 years old, is always a glass of wine. Or maybe some sipuro, a little bit of a Greek spirit, something to just wet the whistle and to keep going with it. In the old days, wine was a very different thing because, of course, the technology and the know-how wasn't as great as it is now. But also, there was a really interesting shift, and I think it was more relevant in Cyprus than it even was in Greece, especially during the COVID era, where you had a really young population that, of course, when the world basically shut down and they couldn't travel, they're stuck on an island. I mean, this happened in Greece too, but not as much of an extent as it happened in Cyprus, where the locals said, well, we have to prop up our local industry. So they became more, I don't want to say financially invested, but they became more invested in learning about their own products and supporting local in order to help them get past the lockdown era, because Greece and Cyprus was very much locked down. They really couldn't go anywhere. So you got a more wine savvy generation that's coming up that I think that, it's not the same as here in the US where, what generation are we in? These XZ, I don't even know what they are. They may not drink, but the ones in Greece are drinking. They're not getting hammered because that's never been part of our culture to go out and get completely shit-faced, come home sloshed, and then you're like banged up for 5 days. It's always been to enjoy it and appreciate it in a more convivial atmosphere. So that's what I've been noticing, especially even on the Greek side, that the 30-somethings, 40-somethings are more interested in supporting the local industry. They'll drink international, don't get me wrong, but they're learning more about it and they're more interested in exploring what we have to offer. Because there are grapes grown throughout all of Greece and Cyprus and in different areas. And they're also different. So you could spend like months in Greece you wouldn't even scratch the surface of what's available. I mean, I've been to Greece. I couldn't tell you how many times. I still haven't seen everything. I keep trying. Cyprus is small, so at least you can manage that, but it's still tough. I mean, to try to get everywhere, you're like, oof, what's going on here? But it's an interesting thing. I mean, and they're finally starting to realize too the value of wine tourism. That was not something we had a lot of because it was a different generation that didn't understand the value of it. So this generation is also really working on enhancing their tasting room experiences. Not so much agriturismo yet. There's not a lot of that because a lot of these wineries are small, but you're starting to see hotels pop up really close. So they're helping offer, they're offering like a wine and, stay package, more really tailored, curated wine trips that are focused on going to specific regions. I actually have a customer from Massachusetts that just got back, I think 2 weeks ago, with about a dozen of her customers. And she went to some of our producers as well. And now we're, they're all back and buying wine and really happy and all that kind of good stuff. And, in order to get them to see some of these producers, hand in hand, like we do as suppliers, I take my distributor partners down. And so for them to understand what we're about, but I'm finding that you're seeing more people more interested in those kinds of group tours. So it's maybe 12 people max. Are they as hyper-focused as we are when we're, they're still drinking if they're on vacation, but they're having a lot of fun too. And they're coming back with a positive experience.
Yeah, I really love that because I think a lot of us, when we think about wine trips, we think about Napa or Italy or France, the standard ones. But then I also love what you talked about culturally, that there's always been like a glass of wine at the table in a Greek celebration or at a Greek dinner. My mother's Italian. And so I think that I have a little bit of that kinship with you. I mean, I remember being a child and we always had wine and warm beer. Yep. Like what the actual fuck? Like, I don't even know, but we had it. And
that's because they didn't have a lot of refrigeration back in the day. I know.
And I'm like, I ain't drinking that. I want my Kool-Aid, like the Kool-Aid man. But anyhow, I do feel like, culturally, it's really something that can bring people together. Right. And we think about it for, like I said, like family celebrations. And it's really about community and all those beautiful, beautiful things.
Yeah, and that's really what it's been. That's what it's about, at least in Greece. I mean, like growing up too, I was very fortunate that I was allowed to go and spend my summers. I mean, this is not something anyone would do. If you did this today, you'd probably be put to jail. But I was left by myself when I was like 15, 16 years old. They just let me go to Greece for the summer. Granted, I had my family there and stuff, but with my friends, and we let loose. I mean, I've been to Mykonos in the old days, and I would go back to Athens and need to sleep for like 4 days straight. My aunt would think I was dead. I'd only get up to like pee and drink some water and then go back to bed for a while. And, but it was never about going out and getting whacked on like massive amounts of like booze. It was never like that. It was always like, let's go out and have a good time. And if there's a drink involved, super. And if it isn't, it's fine too. So maybe it's also kind of strange because when I ended up in college and even after, I never was one of those ones that went off the cliff. Just there was no reason to because I was exposed to it at a younger age. So is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Everybody's different about it. But for me, it's like, that's how I grew up and I'm still in one piece.
I love Andrea. Can you teach my kids this? Because I have teenage boys and I'm getting to that point where I'm starting to get nervous. So,
well, you know what it was like? So some of my friends would come, like my American friends, we would say, and my mother would be like, she'd let them get hammered. Like 2 or 3 nights in a row, they would sit there and want to drink like stupid amounts of booze. They get shit-faced. And then they feel like such crap by day 3. They're like, okay, I think I'm done. I'll drink Coke now, or I'll drink some water now. And it was like the novelty wore off. It's like, because it's available to you. So that's where a lot of it came from. And, that's why some of my friends with my godkids, they're like, we're going to send you out with your godmother to the motherland. I'm like, okay, as long as you're okay with what's going to happen, because I'm not going to tell them they can't do it. So
I'm interested, Andrea, to talk about the difference between Greek wine, Cyprus wine, the difference between them, but also culturally. So maybe individual of the countries, and then talk about the wines.
Okay.
I get to Bridget's point. Not everybody knows Cyprus.
Oh yeah. Well, let's start on Cyprus. Cyprus is an interesting place. It is an island that was formed billions of years ago. And this is where people start to get you can geek out on this. It was formed when the African and Eurasian tectonic plates collided. So if you look at a map of Cyprus, it looks like a stingray, and there's a spine on the mountains, Troodos Mountains, that basically form like a spine right through the middle of the island. Because this was formed during a volcanic, activity, the island is completely phylloxera free. So our rootstocks there are ungrafted. So that's the first wild thing. When people hear that, they're like, what? Seriously? But you're 90 nautical miles from Lebanon. That makes it fucking hot. I mean, I was there last summer and I was like, holy shit, I'm never doing this again. I was there in June and oof, it was hot. You're really, really in the Middle East. But what is interesting about the island is that because of this mountain range, you have peaks that are about 4,000 feet above sea level. So the vineyards started around 1,000 feet and go north to almost 4,000-ish feet above sea level. I actually have a picture from one of our producers, and I think I took a picture on my phone, like where I was at 4,000 feet. And, you're at the beach in half an hour and you're freezing your butt off up there. So you have really interesting vineyards where some are vines that are like 150 years old, and they're bush vines just on a slope that's like 45 degrees. It's like, how the fuck does anybody even get up there to like harvest? And I tried to climb up there. I was like, okay, not happening. I'm going to fall and kill myself. And so you have also, everything's really steeply sloped. So same thing as in Greece, but in Cyprus too, they don't have mechanization. So everything is hand harvested. So that's like a big thing for both countries. Cyprus has a very different past than Greece. So like when people say Cypriots speak a dialect of Greek. I understand some of it, like very few words. So I know when they're talking about me, because they will call a Greek woman a kalamaru and a guy is a kalamara. That means a calamari, a squid. In the old days, the Greeks would come to the island with their quills and they would have pinky up when they'd be signing things. And I was like, yeah, I heard somebody calling me a calamaru. And I'm like, what the hell are they saying? So one of my producers is like, oh, he's talking about you. I'm like, oh, great. So when I went the next time, I heard them again. I'm like, the calamaru needs her water. Bring me something. I'm thirsty. And they're like, oh shit, she knows what I'm like, I piece it together. But the island is also, and this is, I don't want to go into the political stuff, but I would be remiss if I don't address that in 1974, there was it was in June. It was June of 1974 when the Turks invaded the island, and we have it's a fence, and it goes through the city of Nicosia. So there is 2 checkpoints to get to the northern part of the island. It's the occupied territory. Nobody acknowledges that country except for Turkey. I've never been. I do know that there is the city of Famagusta that looks like it did when there was the invasion in 1974. It was like time stopped, but nobody lives there. They have, there was the 50th anniversary was last year. So we only talk about the Greek Cypriot part. I don't think anything is happening on the Turkish side. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I've never been. I mean, when I was there last summer, perfect thing. We rented a with and they were like, you can't take it to the Turkish side. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not planning on going there. But so I was like, what the hell does this mean? So with these 2 checkpoints, you have to walk across, and your cell phones don't work either. Nothing works. It's like, I guess, when you go to Cuba, that kind of thing. So it's a small part of the country that is the Greek Cypriot side. That's what we deal with. That's all we know. What I really like about it is that Cyprus has followed Greece. I don't want to say they're about equal now in terms of the evolution, but the same thing that happened where you had the negotiants that were ruling the roost after, their occupations and their wars and all of their stuff. And then now that has morphed into, you have 4 major co-ops on the island, and you have about 24 wineries, smaller to medium size. Nobody's making 1 million cases. There's not that much land that we work with that are, producing on the island. And what I really like there is that it is vibrant. They are so invested now, this generation, in revitalizing varietals that were, they found one random vine in the middle of a vineyard, and they're like, what is this? And they're rediscovering grape varieties that haven't existed in like a century. So we work with a producer called Chakas, and they were in a bunch of Xenisteri, which is their indigenous white varietal. They found they're like, the leaves aren't the same. What is this thing? And they've been trying to do like a lot of, testing to figure out what the hell these are. And so they've rediscovered about a dozen varieties right now. And so they're really in small production, but it's really interesting to see that they're trying to focus on that. Like when I started working with them, they did a lot of Chardonnay, Cabernet, and Merlot, because that island was, here's your random fact of the day. Cyprus exists as a commonwealth and in the European Union. They drive on the wrong side, which I cannot handle for the life of me. My husband had to do the driving there because I would have killed us. And they used to have the Cypriot pound back in the day. Yeah, very random factoids. But, it's something that, so for their local market, for the tourists that they used to have, it was a lot of Russians and a lot of Brits, because the Brits also do have their large naval base on Cyprus, where the Greeks have, the Americans have it in Crete on Suda Bay. We didn't want to work with the international varietals. I just wanted the Cypriot varietals. And we're seeing an evolution where they're understanding better now, this younger generation, different fermentation techniques, different ways of doing things, that all of a sudden everyone's like, oh my God, these are so freaking cool. What the hell are these things? Because it's been interesting. So even for us, when we started, I've been working with this one producer, as I said, Chakas, for 12, 13 years now. And I had gone, and I work with their dad, Costa, in one, on like, he's the business guy, but then his oldest son, Orestes, is the winemaker. And so it's fun when the 3 of us have to get together and talk numbers, quantities. I want a clear glass bottle for a wine. And his father's like, but it needs to be in green, and we have to fight on this. This is normal. Like my husband basically was there last summer going, what the hell is this? He excused himself, took a little sip of Tipuro, and went off with one of the other guys and hung out. He's like, I got to leave you maniacs to do your stuff. But, they're really focusing on doing some really interesting things. And it's been really great. I think that for us too, so what I was trying to say was that when I was there a couple of years ago, I was like, I only had to have one good Cypriot producer in the portfolio. Was tough because it was like a unicorn. So I asked Kostas and Orestes, I'm like, well, in order for us to legitimize Cyprus, I need to bring in some other producers. So we tasted a bunch of stuff. I bring in a second producer, totally different than Chakas. So I have 2 now, and we'll see what happens. People are really interested in it because the Xenisteri grape, which is their indigenous white, because and in Greece too, there is no irrigation. Also, they only allow you to irrigate for the first 3 years of a vine's life, just to give it like the essential nutrients before you have to turn off the water, and you can only do it then under extreme duress. But in Cyprus, they've taken it to Australia and South Africa because they need to find drought-resistant vines. So it's really interesting. And I highly recommend people to go to Cyprus and check it out. You can do beach and mountains, and, you can even ski sometimes there. And the thing there, like their food is, even though it's definitely like their cuisine is very similar to Greek, it's definitely got a more Middle Eastern flair, because you also have, they're like a melting pot. When Beirut was being bombed years ago, Lebanon being 90 nautical miles, that's where they were evacuated to. You have a very interesting mix of Lebanese, different Persian cultures, just a lot of different people that have ended up on the island too, that are also adding to their flair. So it's not really Greek. I consider their food is similar, but it has a little bit more of a Middle Eastern tint to it. Like you'll get some really good, like they'll do sheftalies, which is kind of like a Greek meatball, like a kefte, but it's not. They use more parsley. They use different things in their cuisine. But another random factoid for the island is where us Greeks are like more fish-based, especially if you're from the south. Because they were invaded so much in Cyprus, they ended up in the mountains. So they were eating more meat. They still have fish, but it's not part of their base diet. It's kind of wild.
I feel like I've been on vacation already.
Don't go in June or July. Go in like May.
I'm like vacation mode with you. I love all this.
Yeah. No, it's really wild. So that's like that's a thing about Cyprus that, when you're in Europe, it's not that far. I mean, from Greece, it's an hour flight, but you can go, if you go from London, it's a bitch. It's 5 hours, but anywhere else, it's a 2-hour flight. So you could theoretically tack it on, and I highly recommend you do.
Awesome. Yeah. We have time for maybe 2 more questions, Andrea, 1 or 2 questions. So,
I got to talk about Greece. I didn't do that. Oops, they're going to yell at me in the Greek side.
No, go ahead.
So Greece, obviously been around, I don't want to say a lot longer. I don't want to say that at all. But in terms of where the industry is, you have, the country is big, but you don't expect it to be what, we are mostly mountains. It's 80% mountains in Greece. So you have a lot of limestone in the soil, and you have a lot of different terroirs and topographies as a result. So everybody thinks that Greece is just party beach all year round, and that's not the case. Most vineyards are not at sea level. Some are, but that's the exception to the rule. The majority are in the mountains, and they're up on hillsides. So again, there's no mechanization in the country. Same thing here, that we have there's over 200 indigenous varietals in Greece. And everybody was really fixated for a while on Assyrtiko, Ayorgitiko, Moscofilero, and Xinomavro. And not to knock them, they're wonderful grapes, but that was what the previous generation was comfortable with, right? This younger generation has realized that, okay, those are great, and they really are, but there's so much more to work with that is so unique that you're seeing them really playing with grapes that were as well almost extinct. And you're starting to see them emerge as like viable next grapes, like Lignona, Rabola, which usually comes from the western part of Greece, the Cretan varietals, which they have like I think it's over 3 dozen, probably more varietals that they only grow on their islands. Things that, that as you go north, you go and you try Mavrudi. That's actually related to the Bulgarian Mavrud. They're understanding that there's so many different fermentation techniques and minimal amount of oak that you can really understand the essence of a varietal. At least that's what my guys are about. And they're really, at least my people, again, they're working more sustainable. Same thing in Cyprus. I don't want to say that they're natural, vegan, organic. Some have that, but we are almost inherently organic anyway, because there's very little spraying. There's not that many pests. It happens every once in a while. You get some mold, you get some rot, you get some hail. Climate change has definitely exacerbated some stuff, but it's really a very invigorating time, I think, because they're really learning. They're collaborating. They're talking. What are you doing with this grape? Oh, I like that. We have a producer that does an unoaked Xinomavro. When he started that 15 years ago, people thought he was insane. Imitation is the best form of flattery. Now you're seeing everybody else doing it. So it's interesting because Cyprus and Greece are very similar in that. And what I like too is that they can all play nicely in the sandbox together. At least my people can so far. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Did I miss anything? I don't know if I did.
I think you covered both Greece and Cyprus. Perfect.
I tried.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody knows about Cyprus as much. That's why. But then there's actually a really fun slide that I always show in my presentations to sales reps, especially. I have this one slide that shows if you flatten the world and you take the latitude lines, right? The latitude are the ones that go horizontal, right? I always forget that. If you take it from the top to the bottom of Greece, and I'm not putting Cyprus in it because they're off on their own, but we basically, if it's the same line as all of Sicily, southern Italy, Spain, and Portugal. And then when you continue that line straight across to the United States, you hit Napa. And when people see that, they're like, huh? It's like you see like eyeballs like pop out of heads, light bulbs go off on heads. So we actually have some of the best, if you're considering that the best, we're in the same, arena. Just we're still coming of age.
Perfect. Thank you for all the big explanation on both. If I'm going into a wine store for the first time and I'm like, okay, I just heard Andrea talk about Greece and Cyprus and her amazing wines and these amazing places, where should I start? I'm going to buy one wine off the shelf. Where should I start?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
I know. And I don't want you to pick your favorite child.
No. I'm not picking my favorite child. Retail has always been difficult, I think, especially here in the United States. This is not the same everywhere else in the world because they've got their shit together. This is a uniquely American problem that many retailers in the US haven't found the value in devoting a section to Greece because they don't understand it. So a lot of times, you'll find one wine and it's stuck down on a bottom shelf and it's just not, when I have to deal with retailers, I have to tell them, you have to think outside the box. If you're going to have a section, one wine ain't gonna do it. So on the customer side, it's where's your Greek section? Where's your Cypriot section? If they don't hear the consumer being vocal, then they're going to go online to an e-site and they're going to find something there. In terms of if you again, what we do, again, I'm not talking for my other, my competition. Our producers are definitely more varietal driven, fruit forward, cleaner styles. If you want to understand a grape, trying unoaked styles of Sonoma Vro are great ways to start with that grape. Everybody hears the Sirtico and then they automatically think of Santorini. Try one from the mainland because they're actually I'm not going to say approachable in terms of a price point. You can get a really good bottle of Greek wine and Cypriot under $30 a bottle. So you can try Athenee Steri from Cyprus. You can try a Ribolla. You can try Villano or Vidiano from Crete. You can try other varietals and then have a more open mind to it. And that's what I would say is, the customer has to be the one to say, I heard a really interesting podcast. Why on earth aren't you guys giving more value to this category? We do really well in restaurants because a lot of our things tend to do better with restaurants, because we're more food driven. But that's what I would say. If you like that mineral crisp, if you drink Albarino, you can easily drink a Athenee Steri or an Assyrtiko or a Ribolla, a Vidiano, doesn't matter. If you drink Nebbiolo, Sonoma Vro is a great option too. You just have to kind of take it for what it is and try it with food. And not just Greek food, like barbecue and stuff is delicious. Fat acid. You want to have them attack each other.
I love that. That is such great advice. And so our listeners, I want you all to run to wherever you're buying your wine and demand a section dedicated to Cyprus and to Greece. Let's start a revolution, shall we?
It's what we need.
That would be amazing. And with that said, Andrea, I want to thank you so much for coming on Served Up. I do hope that you'll come back and give us an update.
Sure.
What you're up to, what your wines are up to. And on behalf of Jessica and myself, I just want to wish you some great health and a lot of peace. Cheers to you.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for having me. And I'd love to come back and maybe sometimes we'll talk about some different regions and dive deeper into things because there's a lot. We can open Pandora's box and then we can all start wearing the Greek flag and the Cypriot flag. I'm in my house where I've got blue cabinets with a white wall. So, I'm channeling the inner motherland over here.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
My
Andrea.
pleasure. Thank you both for your time. And thanks to the listeners. I hope you found us interesting.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of our future Served Up episodes. Cheers.